In 2009, maybe 2010, 15 years ago now, I was head of digital media at Working Mother Media, the parent company of Carol Evans' beloved Working Mother magazine. And on our website, we developed a stable of women bloggers, the brainchild of Kelly Daly, the site manager. When I came on as editor, we increased the number and visibility of more than 100 bloggers, everyone from kitchen table writers to entrepreneurs, rising executives, academics, and even the first woman governor of Massachusetts. Placed their content in our newsletter, highlighted their work, and gave them a shout out in the magazine. But no money changed hands. At that time, we heard about a woman-owned company creating a platform which looked a little like ours on the surface for what came to be known as mommy bloggers. The platform was BlogHer. I approached them about a partnership for us to publish on their platform and they could publish on ours. To me, it was a simple content swap. But in our conversation, I realized they were finding and mixing a secret sauce. BlogHer created a community for bloggers with an opportunity to be paid for their work through relationships with brands and marketers, and a national conference where both sides could come together and where creators could push each other and learn from each other, and more. This I knew was something Working Mother needed to do, but could never have the technology investment or commitment to make it happen. But in those years, I got to know the three co-founders who built their company to more than 75,000 registered bloggers and successfully sold it for millions. In a moment, we will meet one of the co-founders who created a new kind of business as one stop on her Kaleidoscope career. Welcome to Kaleidoscope Career. I'm your host, Helen Jonsen. Picture a kaleidoscope. Inside, it's made up of multiple pieces of colored glass that get twisted and turned to create unique images. Many of us have had a long list of skills, interests, and passions, and when we move them around, we create a variety of combinations, even as the fundamentals stay the same. On this podcast, we will meet interesting people who, like me, have had kaleidoscope careers. You know, at a time when the world of workplaces have been disrupted, it's time to learn from those who have succeeded without a linear resume. Please join us as we discuss a kaleidoscope career. Please welcome my guest, a really dynamic woman who embodies the kaleidoscope career. Welcome, Elisa Camahort Page. This is our coast-to-coast conversation from San Jose to New York's Hudson Valley.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Helen. I'm excited to talk to you.
This is so great. Now, you describe yourself as a serial entrepreneur, a trusted advisor, a strategic consultant who launches and scales businesses, products, and communities, and initiatives that harness the power of people. That's an amazing description because I think it's all true. It seems that the foundations of your kaleidoscope career are listening, creativity, making creative thinking work, along with a genuine interest in people.
Wow, I should be taking notes. But people, you should know, I didn't say those things. That's Helen synthesizing it. So, and I like it.
Well, I think it's interesting because it makes you sound like a tech guru. But the truth is, you started as an actress. So tell us how that whole thing changed.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. When I started doing theater when I was maybe 13, and I was just immediately smitten. And all through high school, I went to college and got a theater degree and a vocal music minor. And I really only went to college because it was expected of me. And my real dream was to move to New York. And my mother grew up in New York, and my grandmother still lived there, and other relatives. So I felt like I knew New York and I wanted to live there. And I had a whole plan, and I went to do summer stock theater, and I got my union card, my equity card. I still pay my dues to this day on my actor's union card. And I did move to New York. And then I got there, and then I was like, you know, and I'm all of 22, and I'm like, oh, now what? Like, you can't really plan for how you're going to guarantee success in that world. And what ended up happening is that after 4 years of living in New York and pursuing that, I realized, you know what? I don't think this is the life for me. I really missed California. I had a somewhat jaded perspective that, oh, it's not about talent, and it's not about hard work, and it's not about being easy to work with. It's like who you know, and connections, and networking, and luck, and timing. And That's not what I dreamed of, you know. Of course, later I realized that was so naive of me not to realize that every industry is that way. Like
Right.
luck and timing and connections in your network are critical factors of succeeding almost everywhere. But I didn't know that at the time, and I was super tired, if I'm being really honest. I was super tired of being pretty poor, paycheck
Mhm.
to paycheck, you know, living in the greatest city in the world, but never being able to afford to do anything in it. You know, it's lots of free stuff does exist in New York, so I took advantage when I could, but I just, you know, I just was like, actually maybe not. Maybe I was wrong all these last dozen years. And I like to say that there was something very liberating about that. I was 25, 26 years old and saying, "Oh, no, I need to do something else." And it can literally be anything because I didn't study or learn how to do anything else. So whatever I choose, I'm going to have to figure it out. And I didn't go into tech right away. I got a job back in California through a friend of my family who worked in the commodities industry. He was a trader and he hired me as his assistant, who I called in his trades. I managed his positions. I didn't actually make trading decisions, by the way. I managed his positions and gave him his reports and did his monthly accounting and reported out to his clients. And I learned about an entire industry I knew nothing about when I walked in, and he just taught me, and I did that for about 7 years. And then at that point, I realized, because this is pre significant internet
Right.
capabilities, right?
Mhm.
At that point, I realized, oh, hey, if I am ambitious and I want to advance, the commodities and financial industries in general are not here in California. They're in Chicago or New York, and I don't want to move to those places. So I was like looking around again. Well, like, what else could I do? Oh, I live in this place which has this nickname, Silicon Valley. Maybe I should look into tech. Maybe that's where the real action is. And it happened to be 1997, which was the start of the boom times. Dot-com boom was in full swing. And I just, again, through somebody I knew, got a job at the bottom in the marketing department of a hardware company. Started out as an admin to the VP of marketing, and just had the feeling like, well, let's figure out if I'm any good at this and if I like it, and started over again.
No, but what you found there is your skills as an actress,
Mm,
the resilience and the persistence you did as an actress to learn how to survive on your own. You were able to bring into that first job, even in finance, to learn those pieces, keep your ears open to business, to be ready to absorb something, and then move on. I won't even say pivot, move on to something else where you
yeah.
were going to do the same thing. Those same skills that got you that far were going to take you to the next step.
Yes, I learned I could learn. I mean, that's the
Right.
main thing. I learned I could learn. And people always talk about sports as being, oh, look for people who've played sports because they know they've been on a team, they know how to work as a team. And I'm like, look for people who've done the arts, who've been in theater, who've been in choir, who've been in band, because there are a lot of outliers in music and theater and the arts. There are a lot of misfits. There are a lot of rebels. There are a lot of people who don't necessarily make it in the typical. And so when you get out in the world, you learn how to relate to all these different kinds of people. Because again, producing anything like that requires all different kinds of people. You've got the stage manager, you've got the star, you've got everyone working on it together, pulling together. And I think it's really useful.
So, what about those other positions that you went to from there? Where do you think that sort of started to channel these same talents through and maybe broaden them?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting how theater exercises your brain. And I once gave this big presentation. I was a junior employee in my first tech job, and the guy who had hired me and was my mentor had been pushed out. They hired a new VP of marketing, and he was meeting the sales force for the first time at this big sales meeting, and he wanted me to speak, which I hadn't spoken at these meetings before, and he wanted me to deliver the message that they weren't really cutting it and they needed to get better at being salespeople. And I was like, me? Like the marketing coordinator? Like, how does this make sense? And I even had my other mentor kind of go to bat for me and saying, why are you setting her up, like walking her into the den of lions? But I took it on and I gave this presentation and it was very successful. I like got everybody on their feet, like shouting and cheering by the end. and whipped them up into a frenzy of like enthusiasm and motivation. And as I left the room, because I was done, the VP of HR kind of looked at me and said, "Oh, I see where that acting comes in." And I said to her, I'm like, "It also helps that I knew what I was talking about, because acting can help you think on your feet. It can help you feel comfortable on a stage. So even as an introvert, I'm not afraid to speak, but it can't help you say true smart things, and in fact, when you're acting, much of the time you're given a script. If you
That's
sound
right.
smart, it's because someone wrote you that way. It's like Jessica Rabbit. She's not bad, she's just drawn that way. So I always felt like it's not that it's not helpful, but it certainly won't compensate for not doing the work of knowing what you're talking about. And so as I went up through the dot-com boom and started to live through the dot-com bust, it was a pretty heady time in Silicon Valley. You were able to advance pretty quickly. Again, if you knew what you were talking about and you worked hard and you learned. And I really learned how to find the people who wanted to teach an eager learner. And these people exist in every company you go to. The people who love what they do so much, they're just thrilled somebody wants to hear more about their work. Find those people and let them help you learn. And that was really one of the critical things I did as I was hopping around in tech.
Wow, that is so interesting. Now I would like to fast forward. You took that experience and created something new. Along with co founders Lisa Stone and Jory Desjardins, you ended up building what would become BlogHer and turned it into a successful and remarkable space for a community of women bloggers across the country. Tell us how the magic happened.
So, as the dot com bust was spiraling down, and my company was doing layoff after layoff. And at the same time, I was hitting a glass ceiling where they laid off like 2 or 3 VPs in a row, but they wouldn't make me VP, even though I was managing the whole entire team and steering the product management and marketing team through all this chaos. And I just had a sort of epiphany as one more layoff happened where I really actually thought and was hoping I would be on the list, and I wasn't. And I thought, "Ugh, to go back on Monday." And I'm like, do I? And I kind of went in and instead asked to get on that list. I think I assumed that I would just go find another job in the same industry, similar job, similar industry, but someone who would, hire me at the level I thought I deserved to be. And I realized that I wasn't doing anything to make that happen. I was being completely reactive instead of proactive. And I thought, that's not really me. Like, why is this happening? And then maybe I just don't want to be. I had spent, more than a dozen years in two very heavily male dominated spaces, the financial industry, the hardware silicon industry. And I thought, maybe I just don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to, the acting also helped me be successful in relating to a lot of different people, but I didn't necessarily like who I had to be to relate to a lot of different people. So at the same time, I started blogging as a personal thing. It was just like I was having fun. I was writing a lot of reviews and movies and books, and I was just having a lot of fun. But I had this kind of peanut butter and chocolate moment where I realized that blogging and marketing could really serve a main function for organizations. And I convinced someone I knew who ran a theater to let me do marketing, write a blog on behalf of the theater and use it as a marketing channel and get a test case out of
So
it.
here that
And
acting and theater all comes back in.
yeah, I thought, well, hey, maybe I can like be in this world but still make a living. And I mean, of course, I soon realized that arts organizations never have a lot of budget and don't pay on time, and that's very hard. They're strapped. They're always strapped. So I was like, I need some enterprise clients, clearly. But I took that case study and I took it to other theaters then, and I got myself a little business going doing blogging. There was no social media, let's just be clear, doing blogging and online community for theaters, and then realized, oh, if I want to make better money, I need to broaden my target audience. So I kind of was doing that's what I was doing when I met Lisa and Jory. We didn't know each other. We weren't friends, colleagues. I met Lisa through a mutual friend. I met Jory sitting next to her at a conference. And Lisa and I, our first meeting, we went to coffee and we were talking about all these conversations about how the mainstream media was just beginning to pay attention to blogging, but every blogger that they sourced or cited was essentially a white guy. like that. And we're like, oh my God, they're just going to recreate the same power structure of traditional media over here in new media. And that's a damn shame. And Lisa said, and I remember this part of the conversation so clearly, she says, what do you think if you did a conference that was like any other tech conference or blog conference, but all the experts and speakers just happened to be women talking about their expertise? Do you think anyone would come? And I said, oh, I would totally go to that. And then I just looked at her and I said, why don't we do that? And she said, okay. And I said, okay. People always act like your co founders have to be people you have some deep experience with. And that is not my experience. But what is my experience is that we worked on this project together before we made a company. We were just going to throw this one day event. That's it. We worked together for 4 months to make it happen. It was only after the first conference that we sat down at Lisa's kitchen table and said, huh, I think there's a there, and figured out what we wanted to do with that. Then we formed a company and we right away hired a lawyer to write our LLC documents so that it was contractually extremely explicit and fair. And then we got going.
The explicit and fair sounded like something that I believe you would get from three women at a table, where there are three men at the table. That may not have happened that way.
Perhaps, but I think I don't disagree, Helen. But I think the point is that so many, when I talk about what Lisa, Jory, and I had, as opposed to what goes wrong with partnerships, I think, first of all, we had complementary skills. We were not identical people. I came from the tech world, product and project management. Lisa was a journalist. Jory was in publishing, but had kind of migrated into business development. So we each had things we were the expert in. So I could lead on some things and they could support, and they could lead and we could support. Three is a great number because you're always going to have a majority. And also, if you're working with two other people you think are the smartest people you've ever met, and you can't convince either one of them to join your position, you have to entertain the possibility you might be wrong. The second thing is we had similar work ethics. So, first thing that goes wrong in partnerships is that people have overlapping, not complementary skills. And so there becomes a lot of, especially if there are men in the mix, I do think, you get a lot of chest beating and competitive, like who's going to be king of the hill. And especially if they have the exact same three engineers, there are many, many Silicon Valley partnerships that have broken up, or one or two of those guys gets kicked out, when it gets to a certain point. The second thing is we had similar work ethics. I'm not saying you have to have all type A workaholics, but if one of you is and the other one or two aren't, there's a lot of, feelings that can start to come into that about the effort going in. And the third thing, which is harder to kind of know until you work on a project together, is how is it to have a tough conversation? It's super fun when you're ideating and you're brainstorming and it's so exciting. And that's the fun stuff. It is not fun when you miss a financial target. It is not fun when you disagree about how to do something. There are lots of things that are not fun about running a company or even just running a project together. But can you have depersonalized, reasonable conversations? And, I have to say, Jory and I just had a conversation the other day where at first she was like, I think you're being a little defensive. And of course, my first response when someone
Is to
tells
be
me I'm
defensive.
defensive, no, I'm not. But she said something. I was like, what? Wait, what? And she's like, I think you're being self defensive. I'm like, oh, okay, well, continue. And then I said, well, here's what and then I was like, at the end, did you feel that I could hear you? You feel like you got to say what you wanted to say? She goes, yes, I feel heard. And, that is the way we communicated dating back to 2005. So, and I think
Right.
that's almost the most important one. And it's the hardest one to predict until you actually work on something with complexity together.
So, is there anything else you want to tell us about the BlogHer period as far as your Kaleidoscope career?
Well, I think the thing about it is that running a startup, you will do a million different things. And even to the last day before, we joined the company that acquired us, and a lot of my responsibilities got pared away to people who were already doing those functions. And I was happy about that. Like, I don't have to run the PR firm relationship. Awesome. I don't have to manage the editorial team and the creative services team. Great. But you get very used to handling anything I always say, I'm a generalist because I've done so many things. That was a kaleidoscope all within it. And that's what you'll get when you're a small business, even if you grow with 60 employees, I think at peak. That's still pretty small. I still was in charge of a lot of different things. And it does make it hard on the other side of that to be like, okay, well, what part of that kaleidoscope do I even focus on? And I think that's a challenge. And you either pick and nicheify yourself, or you say, fuck it. I don't know if I can say that. I don't know. But you say, I like being this kaleidoscope. I like doing a lot of things. I'm just going to stay nimble and doing a lot of things and see how that works out for me. But it's challenging to do a lot of things and to feel you enjoy a lot of things and you're good at a lot of things. It doesn't really fit into the mindset a lot of people have about how to be successful.
I think that's true. I think that's how this whole conversation has come up, that those of us who have put together a lot of different kinds of experience, how do we package those in some way that makes sense to other people, even though they make sense to us? How do they make sense to other people?
You do have to find the through line, I think, you know. And you had a through line for me that took what I have said and you like extended it a little bit. And I need to steal that language and like see where I fit that in because I thought it was smart.
I'm sure I could happily send that to you.
Great.
So you took us to BlogHer got sold. You stayed with the purchasing company for a period of few years, 2, 3 years, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And then you went out to do some other things. You've been a speaker, you've been an instructor, you've been using your acting and all of those things as well. And now you and Jory have joined forces again to
Yeah.
create something new. Uh,
Yes.
that next step, I'm going to preface this just a little bit. Does that have anything to do, you think, with the pandemic?
Well, I think the pandemic accelerated all of the issues. And so the pandemic, I think, threw everyone in this bucket of what am I doing? Why am I doing it? Why am I doing it like this? Why am I doing it for them? Like, I think everyone had a global existential, what am I doing with my life?
Right.
And so now it wasn't just us having lunch. It was like every person we talked to was like, what am I doing with my life? And we're like, what are we doing with our lives? And can't we make it better for people?
So fast forward optionality. What does
Yeah.
that mean to you? And what
Yeah.
does it mean as a company?
Well, so Jory was the one who came to me and she says, I think all these conversations we've been having, we have to make something. We have to do something about it. And what we kind of figured out is that something BlogHer did in the very early days was build a bridge between brands and marketers and bloggers and put them together in an ecosystem to build trust and make a new model. Because, brands didn't really trust bloggers. They thought it was like the Wild West out there. You know what? Bloggers didn't trust brands either. They thought they're going to ask me to sell my soul. This could never work. And so we had to create frameworks and policies that allowed each side to feel safe, but it helped to bring them together online and at events to be in community together, to not be separate from one another. Optionality is the similar thing, I think, that needs to a conversation that really needs to happen between and with both people who have organizations to run and objectives to meet and knowledge workers who maybe don't want to do things the way they did things before the lockdown. There's a lot of people saying, I never want to give 120% to any one employer and make them rich more than me ever again. I need irons and fires. I need eggs in many baskets, whatever your metaphor is. Like, I need that because that is actually the way the world works now. And so I think there's a lot of mistrust, and you see it. You see the mistrust in the way people think about employers, and you see the mistrust in the way employers speak about their employees. And this whole return to office, all this conversation is all based on a lack of trust. And so we're like, what if we could bring people together again and build a model together for working together? So, Optionality is a community of practice. It's a place where we're curating conversations, public and private, connections between people, and also with the hope of building a new framework that says there's got to be something between you're a full time W 2 employee who's expected to be 24/7, 120% for a single employer who could lay you off tomorrow, and you're a contractor, gig worker who is basically gets no benefits and is also completely could be fired tomorrow. And like, where is the middle where we can come together and have mutual benefit and most people get what they want? And so that's what we ultimately want to build. But it starts with bringing people together to talk to each other and build trust.
So if you were telling somebody right now, if you were telling me, I want you to be part of optionality, what are you offering? And what is it going to be for me for my life?
So first of all, there's content and curated both based on both expertise and research and also lived experience. Like people who are actually doing the work because I feel like a lot of times we hear a lot from thought leaders who haven't actually done it in decades. We want to hear from both. So there's curated content and then premium membership includes curated community and connections. We're using Slack as our community tool right now because we wanted to launch with something easy, free that a lot of people use. And what we're doing within that Slack is not just getting people in conversation together and helping each other and advising each other, but we're listening. This is the stuff we did for BlogHer is still so relevant. We're listening to the conversations and we're saying, oh, a lot of people seem to be coalescing about needing help with this. Let's form a working group. So right now we have a working group going about people who have a book idea and they want to get it to the next level. So we're curating a series of meetings together in small groups. We had one about personal brand and positioning where a bunch of people were talking about, oh, I suck at positioning for myself. I'm great at helping other people. I'm like, well, then let's all get together. We all say we're good at helping others. Let's help each other. And so we're just right there in the conversation. What do people need help with? Can we form people into groups? Short term, we're not asking you to like sign up to be there for a year, but like short term, let's knock down our issues. And that's part of being able to be organic, responsive, and curate how people work together to knock things off their list that they've been meaning to do. We also do, we do right now, we've been doing virtual events. We're going to do live events. We make sure the voice of the organization is not ignored or lost. We need to bring them in. We need to build empathy between these groups. And we're also working on launching something that's about wisdom exchange and learning from one another in a way that's sort of a win-win. So we're just all about trying to curate community and connection and help people take their next steps towards an optionality driven life and help de-risk. By sharing what we're all experiencing, we can help people de-risk their next step that they want to take but may feel quite apprehensive about taking. And we're just trying to de-risk and take away some of the anxiety of getting used to a different way of working.
So if anybody had more questions about that, more questions about joining optionality, where would they find this information?
Well, optionality.life is our URL. I am Elisa at optionality.life, and you are welcome to email me, and I would be happy to help.
This has been such an amazing conversation, Elisa. Thank you so much for showing us more about your kaleidoscope career and how you are now, through optionality, perhaps helping other people see that there are different ways of working, that the disruption doesn't have to disrupt you personally, that you can make
Yes,
something happen anyway.
yes. And you can honor all the parts of yourself.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for joining us.
Thanks, Helen.
Thank you for listening to Kaleidoscope Career. For more information about our guests, their work, and their passions, check out our show notes. And please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Kaleidoscope Career is a production of Helen Jonsen Media, produced by Helen Jonsen and Maggie Pecknick. Learn more at helenjonsen.com.